Imagine a movie that centers on a hermit, an outcast, who lives far out of town. We aren't totally clear on why he's chosen to live so far out of town, if he was chased out, if it's something he chose of his own accord when he was younger, but either way, he's far away and he doesn't like the people in the town. In fact, he dislikes them so much that on Christmas Eve, he decides to ruin it for everyone. So he puts on a disguise and he sneaks into all their homes after they're all asleep and he steals everything. The decorations, the presents, the food, all of it, in hopes of ruining Christmas for them forever. What sort of a villain would do such a terrible thing? Well, it's a story you probably know. The villain is the Grinch. The story is Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And though it's a great story that we've told kids for years and years and years, there are some unsettling parts to it. Again, how did things get to this point that he was so far out of town and hated them so much? Who cleaned up the mess when all was said and done? Because really, if you put Christmas trees and presents and food all into one big sack, stuff's gonna get broken and food's gonna spoil. Now, if you've been paying attention over the last number of years, I've been encouraging you guys to spend more time reading the Bible. And if you read the Bible, you're gonna come across other equally compelling stories that are worth telling. But again, if you think them all the way through, they can also be messy, unsettling, and even dark. The story of Noah and the ark, the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt and the death of the firstborn in Egypt, and the settling in the promised land. These are hard stories to read when you think it through from the context of all that would have been involved. And these stories can be so hard to read that there are certain people who've read them and have decided that, well, if God is the one directing all this action in the Old Testament, then he cannot possibly be the same God that we hear about from Jesus in the New Testament. Others have just thrown their arms up in the air and just given up on the whole spiritual exercise entirely, saying, if that's what God is like, I want nothing to do with it. The thing is, if I read the story of the Grinch solely as a story about, one outcast being driven out and think only about the mess that's left over afterwards, I've missed the point. And of these difficult passages from the Old Testament, and there are others too, Bishop Robert Barron says this: if you read the Bible in such a way that it leads you to say, hey, violence is a good thing, I should be more violent, or that God is hateful and violent, you have, by that very fact, misread it. And so the question becomes, how do you interpret these difficult passages? And this is where traditional Catholic Bible study has looked at what we call the two senses of Scripture: the literal sense of Scripture and the spiritual sense of Scripture. The spiritual sense looks at some of the deeper meanings, some of the ways in which we can understand what God's trying to say to us in the here and in the now. And there's a 3rd century theologian named Origen. He says we should read these passages in a metaphorical, allegorical, and symbolic way, as though they were about the spiritual struggle. And when you look at it from that perspective, well, the enemies of the Lord, the enemies of Israel, the enemies of us, it's sin. And so the battle, the spiritual struggle that we all face is driving these things out of ourselves. And so the fact that they're eradicated in the way that they are, well, this starts to make more sense because, think about it. How much lying is okay in a friendship? Or how much cheating is okay in a marriage? And I would say none. And so what God is encouraging us to do is to get rid of these things that draw us away from him and to open our hearts that he can soften them so that we can learn, as the Grinch did in his own story, what it is to love and to be loved.
Don't they know what I've done?
As he watched the small girl, he thought he might melt. If he did what she did, would he feel what she felt? And the luscious sound swelled, reaching up to the skies. And the Grinch heard with his heart, and it tripled in size.
reality is that just as the Grinch had a writer, Dr. Seuss, laying out this story to get to the end where he could know love, there's an author of life, there's an author of all of our stories who's trying to do the same, who wants us, as he wanted Israel in the past, to learn what it is to know that we are loved by him and to learn what it is to love others as he has loved us. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a suggestion or a question I could answer in a future video, jump onto the contact page at micahsthird.com and send me a message. God bless you all.